In today's video, we are going to go and discuss business rules in ServiceNow, explained with some examples. So if you're learning ServiceNow development, one concept you must understand is business rules. But what exactly are business rules? When do they run? And how do they actually work in real projects? Now, in this video, I'll explain ServiceNow business rules with simple examples so even beginners can understand them easily. So let's discuss the basics. What is a business rule? Now, a business rule in ServiceNow is a server-side script that runs when a record is inserted, updated, deleted, or queried in a table. In simple terms, a business rule automatically executes logic in the background whenever data changes. Think of it like this. Whenever something happens to a record, ServiceNow can automatically run a script to enforce business logic. For example, automatically setting values, validating data, updating related records, sending notifications, or preventing invalid changes. So when do you run a business rule? Business rule can run at different stages of a database operation. There are four main types, and we're going to discuss this through this infographic here. So essentially, we have four types: the before, after, async, display. And let's dive into each of them. Essentially, a before. This runs before the record is saved to the database. You want to use this when you want to modify data before it is stored. So example, automatically setting the priority based on impact. Now, you don't want to send the information after. Essentially, if there are fields you want updated right away, you'd want to send it so there's one transaction going to the database right before it's stored. Second is after. Now, this runs after the record is saved. When would you normally use this? Is when you want to trigger other processes like notifications or updates. And we'll go through one example of an after business rule from start to finish. But an example could be to create a task when an incident is created. And we'll go through a very similar scenario with the use of problem management and incidents. Now let's talk about asynchronous. Now this runs in the background after the transaction completes, and usually you want to use this based for long running processes so the user doesn't experience delays, such as sending examples or integrating with external systems. So one example could be if you update a form or you create an instance and you want to update the CI information in an external tool, you essentially might want to might have a business rule that essentially starts that transaction to update the multiple sets of data. Display. Now, display runs when the form is loaded. So essentially, you want to use this when a form loads and sends data from server to client. So an example could be to display special messages or information on the form. Now let's go through some scripts that I put together for some examples just to kind of reinforce some of the types we talked about here. So before business rule runs before record is inserted or updated in the database. A use case could be automatically modifying field values before the record is saved. One example here is automatically set incident priority when impact and urgency are both high. So in the example script here, we see if the current incident, i.e. the impact is 1 and the current urgency of the incident is 1, then set the current incident priority to 1. That's what the script is doing. It's very simple, and essentially you'd run this before. Once it's saved, it would essentially send to the database that the current impact is 1, the current urgency is 1, and the current priority is also 1. Then we have the after business rule. So an after business rule runs after a record has been saved. One example is to trigger additional actions such as updating related records or sending notifications. We talked about when an instance is created, automatically create related tasks. We have a scenario we'll go to at the end which is a problem, and I'll talk about it in a moment. And then we go through async business rule. Now, an async business rule runs asynchronously in the background after the transaction completes. Use case could be to perform long-running operations without slowing down the user experience. Examples include sending email notifications, integrating with external systems that we discussed, or running heavy data updates. And lastly, display business rule. So this is to run when a form is loaded and passes server-side data to the client. A use case could be to provide additional information or messages when a user opens a record. One example here is to prevent closing an incident without resolution notes. So we can write a business rule that ensures that if an incident cannot be closed unless resolution notes are provided. So in the example script here, we show that if the current state is 7, which is essentially meaning the current state is resolved, and the current close notes of the incident is empty, then provide an error message to the user on screen to essentially state, please enter resolution notes before closing the incident and set the abort action to true, so they cannot resolve the incident until close notes have been provided. Now let's go through the example of an update related instance. What we're going to go over is when a problem record is resolved, related instance can be automatically updated. I put together a very simple script, and we're going to essentially showcase this working in ServiceNow. What I'll do now is showcase a record where we don't have the script activated, and then once we activate it, we can showcase it working. So let's go through, firstly, let's go through the business rule I put together, and we'll discuss it very slightly just to show the different fields. I'll also showcase how you can get the business rules. But essentially here, we've created a business rule called update related incidents. The table at the moment is associated to the problem table because that's where we want this business rule to essentially run. We can see here that it's inactive because I do want to show this not working, and then essentially once we turn this on, working. Selected advanced because essentially we want this section to appear, which is our JavaScript section. So you can do very simple set field values, add message, but we want to run some complex scripts, so we're going to add the advanced section here, and essentially when we want this to run. So we're essentially going to run this after, so I'm just going to change that to after, and essentially the order. Now if you want this to run as the first business rule based on the operations, then you would want to put this as 100. The reason why we use 100 as essentially best practice to do increments of 100, because if you do have a new requirement where actually it needs to go before this particular business rule, then essentially you could put in 50 for that particular business rule, and it just provides some breathing space. If you were to put 1, 2, 3, you might have to reorganize all your business rules accordingly, so this just provides some breathing space. And you can essentially put this later, so if you wanted it to be the last, you could essentially put 9,999, and essentially you have all that breathing space to work on. But we're just going to put this 100 and essentially showcase this work. Now for the conditions here, I put state is resolved, and you could also do this as a JavaScript condition, and I'll showcase that in a moment. And essentially what we're going to say is we want this on update, so once the record is updated, then we want it to run. Right. Now these are the simple actions, and essentially you can set the values here, but because we're actually going to update related instance, we actually need to do a few checks and table queries, so we're actually going to need JavaScript for this particular scenario. Now over here, this is the condition line, and you could essentially put conditions in JavaScript format, so essentially current dot problem ID is nil, so forth. Because we've got essentially this state here, I think we're fine and we can kind of move on. So we're going to go right into the script. Now essentially we have the script here that checks the queries the incident table and finds the problem ID of the current sys ID, and essentially queries it, and then we do a while loop to essentially check all the incidents related to a problem, and essentially then change the incident state, the close code, the close notes, and update. And these two essentially are required because they are data policies where if you're looking to resolve an incident, you do need to provide some resolution notes and some and a resolution code, and then essentially we can update this record. So I'm going to showcase this essentially not working first, and just to show where you would go to business rules. So we're on the problem list view, and you can go through the list, the application navigator, and search for all problems, and it will take you to the view. And essentially when you go to configure, you can essentially search for business rules, And you can see here, this is essentially the list of business rules. And this is the business rule in particular that we have created that we're going to look to test. So let's go back to problems. Okay, and let's find a problem that is essentially in assess. So we're going to select this. And we can see here we have an assess problem record, and we've got no related instance. So let's just go add an incident that's not closed. Right, so let's use this one. Let's remove that one. Selected. Okay, so we can see here we have an incident associated. If I go to this incident and go to related records, I can see it's associated to a problem. Now we go back here. Essentially what we want to do is move this to resolve state. So we're going to move this to the life cycle of problem. We're going to add some fixed notes. And we're going to click resolve. And what we're going to see here is that nothing has happened to this instance. This is still in progress. So just open it, refresh it, you can see it's still in progress. So what we're going to do now is essentially I'm going to push this problem back to reanalyze. So we could also use a different problem, but I'm just going to push this back. And what I'm going to go and do is I'm going to go back to our business rule. I'm going to make it active. I'm going to save this. Okay, and I can see it's active now. I'll just refresh just to make sure. And now what we're essentially going to do with this particular problem, make sure we have the incident in progress. And essentially what we're going to do, and what I'll do actually thinking about it, I'll add another incident just to show this working with multiple. So let's do this. Okay, so we have 3 different incidents, all in states of in progress or new. And let's just refresh this and make sure we're all good. And we're going to move this to fix. I'm going to move this to resolve. And we can see here, this incident has been resolved, this incident has resolved, and this incident has been resolved. So we can check here. All 3 have been resolved. If we go to particular incident, we go to resolution information, we can see the resolution code is solution provided, as we've essentially added that resolution code in our script. And we've also got the resolution notes that came from the fixed notes. As you can see here, because the fixed notes is HTML, it's pulled in the kind of HTML tags. We can use scripting to essentially remove that, and that might be an updated video just to know how we can navigate around HTML and sanitizing text. But essentially here you can see this business rule has worked. Now there's a few things we can do to make this smarter. Best practice, I would say, is you probably don't want to update incidents that are new in progress. For this particular user scenario, you probably want a ways of working that if an incident is waiting for a problem fix, that you essentially have it on hold. And probably a on hold reason that says awaiting problem, and if those 2 match, then you would only look to resolve those incidents. So anything that's new, that's work in progress, it's not waiting for this problem, you don't mistakenly resolve those. So that's essentially what I wanted to show, and hopefully it gives an example of how you can use business rules to essentially do those additional record updates or those process updates. Now, let's quickly recap and let's talk about best practices for business rules. So to maintain optimal performance and maintainability, use before business rules for modifying field values, use after or async rules for triggering processes, add conditions to control when rules run, and we talked about that very briefly, avoid unnecessary database queries, keep scripts simple and efficient, and document business rule logic clearly. Now, following these practices helps prevent performance issues and ensures maintainable code. Essentially, let's quickly recap. Business rules in ServiceNow runs on the server side. It executes when records are inserted, updated, deleted, or queried. There are 4 main types that we went over: before, after, async, display. And essentially, business will help automate business logic and maintain data integrity. If you're learning ServiceNow development, understanding business rule is a fundamental skill. If you found this video helpful, please do like the video, comment any questions below, subscribe for more ServiceNow tutorials, and I'll see you in the next video. Okay, bye.